We have a presentation tonight, Transforming the Homeless System of Care, presented by Jaime Jenett.
Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. My name is Jaime Jenett. I'm with the Contra Costa County Health, Housing, and Homeless Services Division. We're a new division. It used to be the homeless program, but same effect. I'm here to talk today about some big changes that are happening to the way homeless services are delivered in the county. And I'll go fast. This is usually sort of a half an hour presentation. I'll give you the Cliff Notes versions, but I'm happy to take questions as I go or at the end. So just a quick snapshot. Every year, Contra Costa County does something called the point in time count. And this is something that HUD requires, Housing and Urban Development. The federal government requires communities to do every other year. We do it once a year. To basically pick one night at the end of January and take a snapshot and try and count as many folks as we can that are homeless or at risk of homelessness. So we just did this in 2017, but we don't have the new report yet. So this is data from last year. What we see is about 1,700 people were considered literally homeless, and about another 1,700 people were considered at risk. We know that these numbers are lower than reality, but it's the best that we can do. One thing I will mention is that between 2015 and 2016, we saw about a 30% increase in unsheltered homelessness in East County. So y'all are probably feeling that. It's documented in the data, and I don't know what this year will show, but I suspect that there's a high number of folks out in East County. So our system of care has looked a bit like this, a little bit of a hot mess. And Contra Costa is not unique in this, and having lots of great providers that are all doing really good work, but not very coordinated. This is very common in many communities. And so HUD actually has asked communities to do something called coordinated entry, which is basically what it sounds like, having communities coordinate how folks enter into the system of care and move through it. So, until recently, what happened is a consumer or a community member or even a provider had this whole range of great options, but no real easy way to decide who could do what and how to get people there. So we're changing our system. And we're moving from the left, where you have this sort of precious resource of housing in the middle and not a clear path for how to get there, lots of folks trying to get through. We now have some clear entry points and a system to connect people to what's appropriate for them. So best case scenario on any given night, we have about 500 shelter beds. So that's like right now where we have our seasonal shelters, and the county shelters are doing overflow with people in the hallways on cots. On any given night, we also have about 1,100 people that are unsheltered. So not all of those folks want to be in shelter, but a good chunk do, and we don't have capacity. And the other piece that's missing is, for those 500 beds, the way it's been set up is first come, first serve. So if you look at, the green person could be 85 years old with congestive heart failure and living on a park bench for the last 10 years. And the gray person could be an 18-year-old that just got kicked out of the house and has a car and is actually probably doing okay. The way the system's set up right now, the gray person could get a shelter bed before the green person. So we're, again, looking at this of how to get the most vulnerable people connected first. So what I'm going to describe is in progress. So I keep saying our system of care is kind of like in puberty right now. It's a little awkward. We're in a bunch of transition. Some pieces are fully formed and some pieces are still coming. So at the end, I'll recap what's in place now and then what's coming. So instead of that sort of big mess, we've now got 3 points of entry. So consumers, law enforcement, healthcare providers, service providers, community members now have 3 ways to connect folks into care. So call, so 211 is one way. Care, which are care centers, they're brick and mortar facilities that folks can actually walk into and get services. And then core, which is our outreach teams. Ideally, connecting through any of those 3 points, folks will get connected into the kind of services they need, which may include interim housing like shelter or transitional housing, if it's available and appropriate, with the goal to get folks into permanent housing. So I'll go kind of briefly through this, but in terms of 211, one of the benefits of having 211 be a main port of entry is they are available 24/7. So somebody will get a live person. They won't be leaving a voicemail and sort of hoping for the best. Those folks will also be able to do some assessment and screening over the phone to start to get people going in the right track, connecting them to the appropriate resources. They will be connecting folks into the care centers that I'll be explaining in a minute. And this is a good resource for people that are literally homeless, but also folks that are at risk. So when you get the calls of like, I'm about to lose my housing, I'm doubled up and I'm going to get kicked out and I don't know what to do, this is a really good resource for that. Core teams are the coordinated outreach, referral, and engagement teams. So these are the outreach teams that are actually going out into encampments, going actually by the emergency rooms and the jails to connect with folks that are sort of disconnected and living in places not fit for human habitation or getting discharged from institutions with no connections. We've had outreach in our community. It's usually been done by 2 different agencies. They kind of had different protocols. What you got kind of depended on which team you got. We have a much more coordinated system now. So there are actually some county teams and some teams run by a nonprofit. They're actually managed by one coordinator. They're working under the same protocols. They are sort of basically going to be seamless for the user. That distinction of who's doing the service is not really going to be apparent. Those teams will be operating Monday through Saturday from 7 in the morning until 1 in the morning. And the county-funded teams, there's 2 during the day, and those are 2 people in each team. So just think about the massive geography of our county. So we've got 2 daytime teams and 1 evening team, but actually some communities are now starting to fund their own. So Martinez and Pleasant Hill are funding their own team that they're going to share, and it looks like Walnut Creek and Concord are going to do something similar. So communities that are concerned about the level of folks that are unsheltered and in need of connecting to services there's an option for them to sort of put resource towards that. These teams aren't crisis response as much as working to connect people in with services. So the example I like to give is, say I'm homeless and I'm really not interested in services, and the core team comes by 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I'm not interested. They come by the 4th week and I have a really bad infection in my leg and I actually am finally ready for care. We have built a relationship and I'm ready, and there's an opportunity in a relationship, and then I'm able to get into medical care. There's going to be connections. There are connections to behavioral health care. They're able to do some of the housing assessments in the field, enroll people in benefits in the field. They have iPads where they can do all of that in the field. Healthcare for the homeless is now going out with them once a week as well. So that's really for folks that are literally homeless, not folks that are at risk, but they're going all throughout the county right now. So care centers, so we've had multi-service centers in our community that sort of offered the basics of like showers and some food and some light case management. But what they were lacking was robust housing navigation. So folks that are homeless that need support for how to get into housing. That's pretty much been confined just to once you get into those few shelter beds at the county, then you had access to that resource. So we have 4 housing navigators that are now going to be at these care centers, helping to add some additional support. Right now there are 3 sites, and actually this is the preview part. The Richmond site is not quite up and running yet, but the Central County site, that's Trinity Center, that's going to be the location is the location for that care center. And then in Concord, there's a site that's next to the shelter there. We are working on a site in East County. That's obviously a huge gaping need. We have the funding. We're working on finding a location right now. So related to this, one of the things that we struggle with is lack of capacity in our system. There's more need than there is resource. So one of the things we're piloting is something called a warming center. So the best way to describe what makes this different from a shelter is that this is chairs, not beds. So this is in the evening from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. It's a warm, safe, dry place for somebody to be. There are staff there. They can get showers. They can get some food. They can have an indoor place with chairs that they can be. For folks to get into this, the core team actually is getting called out, or as they're encountering people in the field, they need to put eyes on folks. So it's not just like show up and get in, but it is a piece that we're adding to our system. And ideally, this is going to be rolling out with the rest of the care centers too. We're just piloting it in Concord. Just quickly, so we have the care centers that I sort of think of as the mothership, and then the care capable centers I sort of think of as the satellite. So piloting this with Monument Crisis Center, they're not explicitly homeless service providers, but they do see a lot of folks that are homeless or at risk of homelessness. So they're being funded to do some housing assessments and also transportation to get folks into care centers where they can kind of get more robust assessment and care and case management and screening and connection to resources. And we're looking at this as a good hub for families and seniors, as a place for them to start. That's kind of the populations that they serve already. Ideally, we'll add some more of these as we go, just trying to expand capacity in our really big county. One last piece I want to talk about is housing navigation. So this really, as I mentioned, there's going to be 4 housing navigators that are placed at the care centers, based out of the care centers, but they're mobile. And their role is really to help folks put together the papers they need, all their documents and what they might need to apply for housing, helping them fill out the housing application, taking them to appointments with landlords, helping coach them for how to talk to a landlord, coaching them on how to dress and sort of what's appropriate behavior for those sorts of meetings, and so helping them get into housing. So just a quick summary of what's new versus what's the way our system has existed. So there's now just really 3 points of entry instead of 30. An assignment of resources, really, we're moving towards making it based on vulnerability versus first come, first serve. So we're doing that already with permanent housing, where we're using a vulnerability assessment, and we're actually using those scores and starting with the most vulnerable and working our way down. We're eventually hoping to move to that with the shelter system. So we don't have that in place yet. That's coming. The warming center is new. We're going to try that out. Adding housing navigation services in the community beyond just in the shelters. And really having standard policies and protocols across providers. So we've had this patchwork of providers that are all doing good work, but it's really like what you got was really different depending on where you landed. Really working towards an integrated, comprehensive system where everybody has a good understanding of what's expected of them and what they could get when they walk in. And as I said, coordinated exit from homelessness, so really trying to prioritize housing for the most vulnerable. Just opportunities for future growth, what we're hoping. So we're really like in this experimental phase right now. Literally 2 days ago was the first day that phase 1 went live. So we're in the middle of a lot of change, which is really exciting, and we have plans and hopes for bigger things. So already the core teams are starting to expand. So cities, as I said, are starting to pay for their own teams. We actually have a team that's going to be just for the waterways. So just trying to think creatively about where people are living and where to connect with them. As I said, an additional care center in East County is a top priority. We hope to have something in place, ideally by the end of the year. We would love to have that warming center capacity to all of our care centers, just to add so that, my bottom line is we don't want to have anybody dying on the street. And we have to be focusing on the most vulnerable to prevent that from happening and getting folks into what resource we have. And then ideally moving towards a 7-day-a-week operation. So our system as it stands right now, like you're still homeless on Sunday, but there's nothing available on Sunday. So ideally with more funding, that's a plan to expand services 7 days a week. This is just a very quick snapshot of the implementation phasing. So we can't roll it all out at once, but right now, what's live now is that the core teams are out and moving. The 211 call center is now referring folks to the core teams, or referring the core teams actually out to the calls, referring people to the care centers. We have housing navigators in place now at the care centers, 2 of them anyway, and the warming center is open. So our next phase that we're looking at for hopefully May is creating a prevention and diversion. So that's basically how do you keep somebody in their house and keep them from getting evicted, or if that's already happened, how do you keep them out of the shelter or off the street? Coaching, really talking with people about other places they might be able to stay. So working on that. And then in September, really looking at having a centralized shelter placement system so that those beds go to the most vulnerable, and figuring out a tool and a way to assess that. So I know that was like warp speed, a ton of information. I'm happy to answer questions if you have anything that's come up.
Very good. Thank you, Jamie. Do we have questions from council?
No.
Councilmember Thorpe.
Yeah, so is the county planning on increasing the number of beds?
For shelters? No. There are no plans for that. I think the funding is really limited for that. And I think that's a question that often comes up is, well, why don't we just add more shelters? They're tremendously expensive, and our physical buildings don't have capacity for more right now. So it's a great question, but there are, to my knowledge, no plans for additional shelter beds.
Right. Okay. And in the first part, you talked kind of slightly around demographics, but I was curious about age demographics of
Yes.
the homeless in Contra Costa.
What I can tell you is in the last 5 years, we've had a 90% increase in homelessness in folks over 62. And you probably are seeing that. We're seeing that in the shelter. I just was talking to our manager of the shelters. They have a number of people in there who are over 80 that have dementia and are in the shelters. There's no other place for them to be.
Right.
So, yes, we are definitely seeing that.
Okay. Yeah, I did a ride-along with our code enforcement division.
Oh, yeah.
And I was blown away to see that most of the folks we encountered for homeless calls were senior citizens.
Yes.
But I also have a question around East County versus Central County
Mm-hmm.
and West County. It always seems, and it's not unique to this, but it always seems that out here we kind of get treated as the stepchild, and resources do not seem to flow out here. So I'm curious as to why we haven't opened a center here in East Contra Costa County, and what other additional resources should we expect from the county as it relates to
It's a really
homelessness?
good question. So there actually was a care center in East County, and ironically, it was actually overutilized. It had higher, more people were using it than that facility could actually contain and keep the place safe. So there was a decision between both the agency that was running it and the city that it made sense to close that site. And there's been a long search and conversation happening about where to put one next. And we've actually been looking at physical sites and looking for that. So it's been front burner. I think for the whole continuum of care, really clear that needs to happen. It's been more of a logistical issue of figuring out where to have that happen.
Okay.
But there actually is funding that is earmarked specifically to open up a care center in East County. We just have to figure out a location.
And my last question would be around housing. How are they identifying housing? And so I see you smiling.
Yeah, that is the $1 million question. We're in a housing crisis, and rents just keep going up, and people keep moving further and further east, and the prices keep rising, and they keep moving east. I don't have a good answer for that. We have, part of what we're doing around that is having these housing navigators that are hunting for housing and trying to build relationships with landlords. And I mean, it's a vicious market. And part of why you're seeing so many seniors is people are on fixed incomes and landlords are raising rents and they're getting evicted. So that's really, everybody that's working in homelessness right now in the Bay Area, but also just in California in general, it's a crisis. So I don't have any easy answers. We're all trying to really figure that out quickly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions from council? Councilmember Wilson.
Yes, thank you. I have a couple questions that kind of dovetail off Mayor Pro Tem Thorpe's questions. So you stated in the beginning of your presentation that there's in 15-17, I think, the 30% increase in East Contra Costa, which we've been hearing over the last year.
Yep.
But I find it kind of unusual that you've, in your report, there's been, I think there was 4 care centers opened in the city of Concord alone, and there's a warming center and another warming center coming to Concord. And it just seems like that's kind of out of sync, that you would think, okay, the homeless population is growing more so in East County. Mm-hmm. There should be an expedited,
Yes.
I guess, process to get in these centers. And it's also a little shocking to hear you also stated, we probably won't get a care center till the end of this year, which is December. We're end of February, almost March.
Yes.
So, I'm just curious, what was the process in saying, we're going to put all these in Central County,
Sure.
but the need is in East County?
It's a really good question. So what I can tell you about these 3 sites is these were already existing multi-service centers that had showers. They already had staffing that was trained to do all of these things. What's new at these sites is the housing navigation, and they actually also have some flexible space. So part of their contract requires them to have flexible space for other providers to come in and rotate in. So behavioral health, They're also going to become drug medical certified, so they can offer alcohol and other substance abuse services there, groups and that sort of thing. So basically, these aren't necessarily new. These are existing homeless resource centers that have gotten a little additional funding to add some extra resource. There wasn't enough funding to start a whole new East County Care Center when this all first launched. In the next round of funding, we got enough money, and the issue has been finding a site, and we've been working diligently on that, both with the county and with city, with both Antioch and Pittsburgh, to try and figure out where would be some good possible sites for that. So that's front burner for sure.
Okay, and then you also talked about the teams that will be coming out, like, you know, how often are they going to be in East County, since again the need is here? Yeah. And then since all these care centers are in Central County, are we transporting some of the homeless populations to these centers to take care of their needs, whether it be mental health, housing, job, whatever?
Yes.
Is that happening? And then how often are the teams going to be out here?
Great question. So what I can tell you about the county-funded teams is they are prioritizing their time in the areas that the data shows has the most number of folks that are homeless. So that is East County. I don't have the exact schedule. They have sort of they're working out their schedule of what parts of the county but they also are responding to calls as they come in. So they may have a plan to be in certain parts of the county, but if they get a call, they may go and address that and then come back. So I don't have details about exactly how often they're going to be there, but I can tell you East County is where there's sort of a disproportionate burden of folks that are in need. So that's where they're going to be prioritizing their time. Okay. They won't exclusively be in East County, but that's again like a top priority.
Need to top priority out here. And then the last thing, and this is just more of a comment than the question. I like how you talk about different cities like Martinez and Pleasant Hill pairing up, and Concord and Walnut Creek. Definitely that's going to have to be something that happens out in East County, because it's going to have to be more of a team effort, regional, working with our county supervisors, our state legislators, and even our federal representatives. But really hope that you can encourage that, and us really working together with our neighboring cities on partnering on this. So,
and we're really happy to sit down and have a more robust conversation with you all and the city manager, sort of about what a core team would look like, and how it works to have partnership with another city. And we're piloting it with Martinez and Pleasant Hill, but happy to sit down and have that conversation about what that might look like.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ogorchuk.
The one thing I was thinking of, you're talking about the core teams. Has the core teams met up? And I don't see anything on here. We do have a code enforcement.
Yes.
So have you been aligning yourself with our code enforcement? Because it's not on here.
Yeah, they're meeting on March 6th. Actually, the core team is going to be meeting with folks in your PD on March 6th. So I believe it's the 6th or the 7th.
I'm sorry, is that the first meeting then?
Yeah, so the core teams have just been like piloting for the last 4 to 6 weeks, trying to get their feet under them. They have new staff. They're trying to get their bearings, and they're now sort of officially launching and starting to have formal meetings with PDs and city staff.
Well, I'd like to piggyback off of Councilmember Wilson's comment, and my thought was, you're talking about cities pairing up with Pittsburgh, Antioch, Oakley, and Brentwood, and even Discovery Bay. I think that we should have that conversation with all these cities to see what we can do to pair up, because it's not just in Antioch. It's regional. It's in East. Well, I'm talking about the increase in East County.
Absolutely.
So it is an increase in East County.
Yes.
And we are feeling it definitely, and our citizens are taking the brunt of it. So my last comment would be, in looking at the organization of your organization that you work for, it appears to me, this is just my apparent, what I see, is that there's not a lot of representation on your board from East County. So I see Terry House, who sits on it, and she works for the city of Antioch and Captain Aganaga. And that's basically it from East County. There's nobody from Pittsburgh. There's nobody from Antioch, Oakley, or Brentwood. And I think we need a voice on that board. So I would ask that you consider, when there's a spot that comes up, whether it be a citizen, council, whatever it may be, that maybe we can outreach to somebody within this area, because we know what's going on out here.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the Council on Homelessness is just a quick snapshot. It's an advisory board to the Board of Supervisors, but it also is sort of an advisory board to HUD. And there are different seats for sort of different constituencies. So there's behavioral health seat, a healthcare representative seat, some community seats, government. So we just had a big blast and had over 25 applicants for 9 different seats. And the council just went through their process of reviewing. And one of the things that they do look at is representation from different parts of the county, in addition to for each seat, who's sort of the most qualified for that particular seat. But that actually is something that they look at. And so there's actually considering sort of the range of seats. So there's 3 folks from East County. We have also Gary Kingsbury, who is in Antioch. He's in one of the community seats. And so that is definitely something that the council looks at, is trying to figure out having representation from all the parts of the county.
I agree and I disagree. I apologize.
That's
because
fine.
on that, there's 12 seats, I understand. And Gary Kingsbury doesn't live, he is doing some stuff or working to do a shelter here in Antioch, but that's not come to fruition. So therefore, I think that it needs to be somebody that is living it, that needs to share it with this council. That's my recommendation. But thank you.
Absolutely. And we actually do have a consumer seat and a consumer advocate seat. And so one of those is filled, but there's still a consumer advocate sort of alternate seat that's still open.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Tiscarino.
Yeah, I want to thank you for your presentation. There's a lot of good questions and a lot of good information. I really don't have a big question. I'm just looking at the beginning of your presentation where you had all the scattered organizations that are helping to try to communicate.
Yes.
And you were able to organize it into 3 different core values to try to make this a little bit more workable. My question is, you have all these organizations out there, but are we still having that constant communication with them? Are we still working with them as well to try to make this all happen?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what's shifted is sort of how people connect with those agencies, but most of those are part of sort of the official continuum of care.
Yeah.
The executive directors are coming to regular meetings. So very much.
And the reason why it stuck out to me is, you had mentioned that one of the things you do is the 211, the information. I'm trying to get some phone calls to try to help some folks out. And from the past, my past experience, I've related that 211 service with United Way. I don't know if other organizations are participating or working with you.
Sorry, say it again.
My past, I've related the 201 service with United Way. So my question was, are you continuing to work with organizations such as them and others too as well?
Yeah, so there's sort of, when I talk about the continuum of care, it's sort of this amorphous thing. So there's sort of this formal umbrella where there's agencies that are funded by HUD that are sort of under that umbrella. And then there are a bunch of other service providers that we're always working to stay connected with and let them know what's happening in meetings. So I don't have connection at this time with United Way, but a lot of our agencies do, and I know that they're one of the resources that 211 refers to, and that the care centers connect folks to. But we're always looking to sort of strengthen those relationships.
Okay, I can kind of help out with that if you want.
Great,
Yeah.
absolutely, I'll take it.
Fine. Thank you.
Thank you for your report.
Sure.
As I look at this and I see the list of businesses that you're working with, the list of organizations that you're working with, how strongly are you connecting with the religious organizations?
That's a great question. So one of the seats on the Council on Homelessness is actually a faith community seat. And so we have somebody from Multi-Faith Action Coalition who they represent, I think, probably 80 different faith communities throughout the county. So they're very active, actually, on the Council on Homelessness and doing that piece. There's also, so we have Contra Costa Interfaith Housing is one of the service providers. There's also Winter Nights Shelter, which is a rotating shelter that's actually in different houses of worship that rotates throughout the winter. So actually really pretty robust participation and connection with faith community.
So as we've seen this demographic shift where the actual point in time count is showing a shift out in East Contra Costa, and we're seeing 2/3 of the demographic shifting this direction. When are we going to see that from a monetary standpoint as far as spending goes? Because we're not seeing that same spending from county resources as where the demographics are.
Right. So what I can tell you a little bit about county resources. So most of the funding for the county homeless program actually comes from HUD, Housing and Urban Development, and that money is really only for permanent housing. So the shelter funding and a little bit of this new redesign is coming through HUD. We're not totally clear how long that's going to continue. So figuring out new funding streams is always a challenge. We also have Terry House, obviously, with CDBG. We have ESG funds that are trying to sort of fill in the pieces. But actually what you're hitting on is something that we see as a system of care of, like, there's not enough funding for some of this frontline emergency response for shelters and some of the prevention services. We have very little prevention available in this community. And the county actually doesn't have very much sort of money directly related that's going to homelessness. Most of it is coming through other sources, and we're helping coordinate it. So. And
from that shift from a shelter model to a permanent housing model, we're looking later on today at an item as far as the Antioch home ownership program. Mm-hmm. What does the county have to be able to subsidize or help with that? Because we have, when you talk about affordable communities, we are the affordable community where we have renters that live here, that if they were to be able to given that extra little help to be able to buy, could for the same price own a home as they are renting.
Yes.
And yet we don't have the resources to really be able to help great numbers. Is HUD or anybody looking at it from the permanent housing standpoint as far as helping to subsidize to be able to jump the numbers of that?
Around home ownership, I'm not totally sure, and I'm happy to see if I can find some folks in the county. So Department of Conservation Development probably has some better information about sort of the home ownership piece. I'm happy to do a little research and get back to you. So I don't have a good, clear answer right now, but I'm happy to do some research.
Because I think there's so many people that have come and they're asking, nonprofit organizations, asking, what are we going to do about housing and affordable housing? And really, we're looking at a permanent housing model, but the permanent housing model we're looking at is for those that can't afford getting into subsidized permanent housing and not really helping those that are being rent-driven out of a home and forced to move into a different community because they can no longer afford to live here. Where if we help them to be able to get into home ownership instead, we'd have stable members of our community that could stay here.
Yeah, and I think you're hitting on a piece that is a struggle for me. So my background is public health. I have an MPH. My focus has always been prevention. And I think what's hard is so much of the funding is going towards sort of crisis response. And there's really not very much money for prevention to keep people in their housing and to keep people from falling off the cliff. We know it's so much harder to get people back into housing than to keep them in their housing. So again, I think you're hitting on part of what I've appreciated about this coordinated entry design and rollout is that we're really identifying some big gaps and starting to collect data so that then there can be advocacy for more funding. But that is for sure a big issue that we all are looking at, trying to figure out how do we keep people in their housing, because we don't want folks to fall out. It's really hard to get people back in.
The other question I have with 211, when I have citizens contact me and look for help, I always turn them to 211. Mm-hmm. And for those that have already called 211, when I go call 211, they look at me like, really? That's your answer? Right now, as far as I see it, it's really not delivering a prevention standpoint. I've got one of my patients who's living in her car.
Yeah.
And I sent her to 211 and she's getting no help. Yes. What do we do to help those people get into the right resource? Because 211 doesn't seem to be the answer.
So we're working a lot with 211 to sort of help them figure out how to best connect people with homeless resources. So some of it is they're going to be doing some different and better screening of folks to identify, do they need prevention, do they need diversion, honing in. So instead of a list of maybe 10 referrals, they're going to get 3 that are pretty accurately targeted. But I think, again, part of what happens is there's not a lot out there. So what's happening is they're calling 211 and 211 saying, well, like, here's your 3 options. I can't guarantee that you can actually even get service at any of these places, but these are the 3 that are a best fit. So I think part of what they're going to be doing now is if folks are literally homeless, referring them to a care center where there's staff there and they're able to take a little more time and have actually some case management. And that we're working on that relationship too, of having folks that are homeless getting connected, and then having 211 really do some more screening around prevention and diversion and connecting to them to limited resource that's in our community.
Very good. Thank you for your report.
Absolutely.